it's not easy dealing with that rejection when you're hunting for a job. How do you find the resilience to go through that process without losing hope, without losing faith?
First thing to remember is not to attach too much of self-worth. I think taking things too personally, it does happen. It happens to the best of us. It happens to a lot of people. It happens more often than we know.
Do things that energize you, do things that bring you peace. So it's pretty common these days to see people talk about the difficulty of applying to jobs and how the process can be so tiring. It's not easy dealing with that rejection when you're hunting for a job. How do you find the resilience to go through that process without losing hope, without losing faith, and still staying optimistic, while looking for a job? So to talk about that today, we've got Vinay, who's Director of Marketing at Talent 500. Vinay, thanks for being here.
Very, very important topic in today's day and age, especially for people who aren't holding a job at the moment, right? And for people who go through these cycles of rejection, it can get very, very daunting. It can be very draining, mentally as well. So very important for us to take stock of this, saying that, it does happen. It happens to the best of us. It happens to a lot of people. It happens more often than we know, right? So I think taking it head on is the approach. Very first thing, Nitya, I think it's about not taking things personally. I think, if one takes things personally, especially in things like job hunt and all of that, it won't really end well. It won't. You're setting yourself up for a big disappointment in life in general. And this happens when you attach your self-worth to things like jobs and I think many other aspects of life, right?
Yeah.
But especially, things like a job, that's not that's part of who you are, but that's all, right? That's part of who you are.
Yeah, I think it's especially important. We do live in a capitalist society that places so much importance on your job, right? So it's hard not to see that as a big part of your personality. But I think the minute you start understanding that you have so much more value to offer to the world, you begin to see yourself as a whole person and not just, a name on an employee role.
Yeah.
But okay, let's say I've stopped taking it personally. But there is still that sting, right? Like, I've worked hard for this. I've done all the prep. I have the qualifications. I meet the requirements, Why am I still getting rejected? How do you deal with that thought process?
Right. So if you've moved past, that stage, what we first discussed, I think one of the things that you need to really understand is the complex dynamics of matchmaking when it comes to jobs, right? There's a lot of factors at play. And if you've been on the other side of the table, which means if you have been in recruitment or you have recruited someone, you do know that, there are so many factors at play, such as salary, such as, skill sets, exact skill sets, whether you want to work remote or hybrid. And, if I start naming it, this goes into probably, tens or 20 reasons, right? Why so many things needs to match. So I think, you need to understand that, many of these things could be in your control, but many of things aren't as well, right? So you focus on what is in your control and you try to influence what is in your control. You really cannot do anything about, the other candidates, for example, if they are way better than you are, or, let's say, if they had a very good interview and for some reason you did not do your best, maybe that's not something you can help, right? Maybe you focus on the learnings from this interview and do better the next time, right? So focus on what is in your control. Understand that there's a lot of complexities, behind the screen, and just hope for the best. That's what we can do.
Yeah, I think, be objective, see where you can upskill, see where you can prep better for an interview, or, just understand that maybe your expectations are not aligning with the roles that you're applying for. I don't think it's necessarily a value judgment. It's just a question of recalibrating and in a way, it might be a good thing, right? Maybe it's just not a culture fit, and in that case, you don't want to work there.
Right? The culture. There's just so many. So
Yeah, and that's fine. I don't think that it should be, like you said, it shouldn't be taken personally.
yeah.
But the things that we can control, we should definitely control. I think there's also a tendency to sort of, blame the system at large, oh, recruiters are like this, HR is like that, companies are like this, everyone wants to pay peanuts. How do you stop yourself from thinking like that?
Yeah. See, I think one of the things is, fundamentally, it's not just maybe in job search, but it's to understand, and that's where you gain a lot of maturity, is to understand that, this world does not owe you anything. Let's be very clear. It does not need to give you this out. Because if you start getting stuck in that mindset that, there is, it's going down a rabbit hole, right? It's going to take you to places that's very, very uncomfortable, where you get stuck in a victim mentality, because it feels good, to probably attach blame onto everything and everyone under the sun except you. But, just understand that this is part of a system. This is how businesses function. This is, yes, collectively, I think everyone needs to take steps to make things better in terms of communication. But, if it's not working, just cut your losses and move on. Just move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
If you are, cynicism is something that I personally hate, right? And if you get stuck in a cynical cycle, okay, maybe even if you do have cynical thoughts, I think important to start stepping out of it. So.
Yeah, it's about a lot of self-awareness, actually, knowing for sure what you bring to the table, knowing where your boundaries are, where you will draw a line, what you'll say yes to, where no to, and then just having the right mindset, the right expectations.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's talk about expectations, right? I think that's definitely one of the points which people need to keep in mind, because in this day of instant gratification, right? So reels and T20 cricket and 10-minute deliveries, I think people just want everything like that. It's even for jobs.
Yeah.
So first stop thinking like that. It's not helping your cause. It's good things take time. So let it let that happen. So don't expect these processes to if you're on a job hunt and if you're getting a lot of rejection, just give it more time. Like, I mean, let it come to you, right? Let the right job find you, and you find the right job. Don't just expect it to happen so quickly, right? Because so have the right expectation in terms of time. For sure. I think I want to bring this up because you also had some experience in working with mental wellness companies. So I would say that's one of the things that we also need to keep in mind, right, during this whole, because it can be mentally very taxing. So what do you think? Like,
do things that energize you, do things that bring you peace.
Right.
There's so much science out there that talks about the endorphins that you get from being out in nature or playing with a pet or reconnecting with friends. And I think those are small things that you can do to help you stay grounded while you're going through this process, because it is difficult, right?
Absolutely.
You need the support.
Yeah, very few points. And you also talked about energizing, right? And that's a word to also keep in mind, energy. You really need a lot of energy to go through these tests, right? Because imagine, you are talking to a lot of people, interviewers and talent acquisition folks, and many times there are these case studies and assignments which you really do put your best work into, but it doesn't work out. So how do you really regain energy? Because energy is required, right? You cannot be on a downward slope when it comes to energy. So you are in effect setting up yourself for failure if you don't have energy for the future, for future opportunities, right? So
absolutely. Talking about mental health, things that give you energy, I think when you are aware of the things that bring you energy, and that could be anything, that could be indulging in a hobby, it could be going out with friends, it could be exercise, it could be a nap, it could be singing, it could be dancing. Once you figure out who you are and what brings you energy, you can balance the job search with these things that sort of energize you, make you feel like life is worth living, gives you that sort of push to say, hey, I want a job that makes me feel almost as happy as, my hobbies or whatever, right? Or
Absolutely.
as hobby.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're on the other side of the table and you talk to people who have a life outside work, actually they are a little more interesting, to talk to.
Absolutely.
Because again, they do not attach everything about themselves onto a job. I mean,
Yeah.
if people are doing that, okay. But, also there are a lot of people who, it tends to be a bit superficial when you do that, right? So it's not the authentic self, right?
Yeah.
So definitely, I think it makes for a difference when you have these hobbies outside, and maybe this is the time to work on some of those things, right?
Yeah. And you never know, right? You never know what skills are going to come in handy where. Yeah. I genuinely believe that.
You can discover a different side of you.
Absolutely. And I think everything sort of teaches you new aspects of yourself, new skills that you didn't know you had. And it's interesting that you bring up the point about having a life outside of work. I find that, the managers that I've worked with who actually have interests and hobbies outside of work are the most balanced and receptive people that I've worked with. And even when you're interviewing, right, you don't come off as desperate. You don't come off as somebody who take the first job that's offered just because you're so desperate and you have nothing going on outside.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, if you are getting rejected, I mean, you should also be in a position where you also take calls whether to join a company or not, whether that's a good fit for you. Because at the end of the day, it goes two ways, right? You're also looking for a job or a career path where you can thrive and not just get a paycheck or something, right? You need to really I mean, obviously in this day and age you can't be that choosy, but you do need to think what suits you the best. Will you be happy? Will you be able to showcase your skills? All of that is important. So again, that adds to even more complexities. We discussed this earlier. There are so many factors at play. And being aware of this fact just helps you, right? It helps you say that, okay, this is an important decision as to what job I will take up next. So that's something else. And I think you talked about learning. I had just picked on that word, right? So learning is important because when you are going through these interviews, it could be that you are actually doing something subjectively wrong. You could be maybe in terms of your resume, or there are these jobs where your skill sets are actually not matching and you're hitting against a wall. So you might be making these mistakes. I think it's important to reflect. It's not don't take things personally. We keep saying that, but then also identify where you're making these mistakes. Otherwise you're just doing the same things without by expecting a different outcome, but you're doing the same things, so that's not going to help, right? So if you make some revisions and corrections on your resume, in the way you're interacting, maybe in your case studies and assignments, look at better references or how to go about it. And I think take the learnings, apply it onto your next opportunities and just move on, right? So
and I don't think companies would always have the time to give you that feedback, but I think it's important to ask for it. You never know where you're going to get a valuable piece of insight, or reach out to colleagues or seniors of yours, have them review your process, maybe do a mock interview.
That's a good idea.
These are things that you can proactively do. These are things you can take control of, right?
Absolutely.
I like what you said about doing the same thing over and over again. It's like that quote, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the results.
Exactly.
Yeah. So certain things got to change.
It's also, a place where you can learn a lot in terms of the bigger picture, right? So what exactly are the industries where you're applying in? Where is the demand for your skill sets? What's happening in those industries? All of these things are actually worth looking at, rather than just having a very microscopic view of,
I didn't get that job.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's not just about that job. I mean, what are these companies you're applying to? Is there even, are they even hiring? How are they doing in terms of their revenues? Are they getting funded? Is there investments into this? There's so many layers on top, right? So it's worth looking at all of that, because otherwise you're blaming yourself. You're like, hey, I'm not getting a job in this. But maybe there are other factors. Maybe this could also be a time to pivot a bit.
But I think at the end of the day, what I'm hearing is, yes, you can put in all of this effort, and there's a lot of things that you can do. Don't limit yourself. But at the end of the day, a job is a job.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's okay to go through that process. It's okay to sort of put in the effort, and it's okay for it to take time.
Absolutely, and it can be a emotional roller coaster. It's always gonna be like that, but don't let it get to you.
Yeah.
Just don't let it get to you. It will take time, but eventually it will happen. Back yourself. Don't resign before you retire. Just don't.
Yeah.
Just don't resign to fate. Just make things happen. I think it's also a very nice time for you to visit your network. It's people really do not use their network as they should. I mean, we live in a time where, again, people know everybody but don't know anyone, don't talk to anyone. Don't do that, right? I mean, if you have had a few years under your belt, or people from college, reach out to them. I mean, it's okay. You don't have to think of it as putting yourself, um, at a place where you're not comfortable, but it's just about
There's no ego there.
yeah, just don't. We talked about not taking things personally,
Yeah.
right? This is part of that. You just say that, hey, I am looking for such opportunities, and for all there could be 3 replies over there out of many you send.
Yeah.
And that could be your next break, right? So I think it's a good time to revisit your network and do the same when you have a job, right? And when others are looking for that. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it's a karma thing for sure.
Oh, 100%. Pay it forward, help other people out.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for more of these discussions that are hopefully helping you on your job seeker journey.